Shadow barked once. Just once. And then he started clawing at the suitcase like something inside was dying. Officer Crawford's hands went cold. 7 years together. Hundreds of operations. Shadow had never made that sound before. Never. The German Shepherd whined, desperate, frantic, pressing his nose against the zipper. His whole body shook. Crawford dropped to his knees and pulled the zipper open. His heart stopped. A child, 5 years old, lips blue, eyes closed, not breathing, and pinned to his chest a handwritten note with words that would haunt Crawford forever. Nobody wanted him. Crawford screamed for a medic. Shadow howled, and somewhere in that dying boy's chest a heart was fading to silence. Before we continue, make sure to hit subscribe and follow this story until the very end. Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Penn Station hummed with the chaos of 10,000 strangers rushing towards somewhere else. Holiday travelers dragged oversized luggage. Businessmen barked into phones. Families herded children through the maze of platforms and tunnels. Nobody noticed the battered brown suitcase sitting alone near Platform 9. Nobody except Shadow. Officer James Crawford had worked the night shift at Penn Station for 3 years. 42 years old, 20 years on the force. He'd seen everything this city could throw at a man, and most of it had left scars. His wife, Catherine, died of cancer 3 years ago. Since then, Crawford had buried himself in work, taking every overtime shift, every holiday rotation, anything to avoid going home to an empty apartment. Shadow was the only thing that kept him sane. The 7-year-old German Shepherd walked beside him, now ears rotating like satellite dishes, nose constantly testing the air. Shadow had rescued 23 people during his career. Drug busts, missing persons. Once he'd found a kidnapped teenager locked in a shipping container at the docks. The department called him a legend, but Captain Morrison wanted to retire him. "He's slowing down," Morrison had said just last week, tapping a pen against his desk. 7 years is a long career for a K-9. Time to bring in fresh blood. Crawford had fought back. "He's got years left in him. You can't just..." "It's not a discussion, Crawford. I'm giving you 60 days. Find a replacement or I'll find one for you." Now Crawford watched Shadow work the crowd, and he felt that familiar ache in his chest. This dog had saved his life in more ways than one. After Catherine died, Crawford had stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring whether he woke up in the morning. Shadow had refused to let him give up. The dog would push his nose into Crawford's hand, demanding walks, demanding attention, demanding that Crawford keep living. "How do you retire your reason for getting out of bed?" Shadow's head suddenly snapped left. Crawford noticed immediately. "What is it, boy?" The dog's ears flattened. His tail dropped. He took 3 steps toward Platform 9, then stopped, body rigid. "Shadow." A low whine escaped the dog's throat. Crawford had heard Shadow make hundreds of different sounds over the years. Alert barks, warning growls, excited yips when he found what he was looking for. But this sound was different. This sound was desperate, almost human. Shadow took off running. "Shadow heel," Crawford shouted, but the dog ignored him. Passengers jumped aside as 80 pounds of German Shepherd barreled through the crowd. Crawford sprinted after him, hand instinctively moving to his radio. Shadow stopped at a battered brown suitcase sitting against a pillar near Platform 9. The bag looked abandoned, unremarkable, the kind of luggage that might sit for hours before anyone reported it. Shadow barked once, just once, and Crawford's blood ran cold. In 7 years, Shadow had never made that sound before. It wasn't an alert bark. It wasn't a warning. It was something Crawford had never heard, a sharp, urgent cry that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than training. Shadow pressed his nose against the suitcase and began whining. His paws scratched at the fabric. His whole body trembled. "Everybody step back," Crawford shouted, waving passengers away. "NYPD K-9 unit, clear the area." He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Crawford. K-9 alert on an unattended bag at Platform 9, requesting backup and bomb squad." Static crackled. "Copy that, Crawford. Units en route. ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Crawford stared at Shadow, who was now clawing at the suitcase zipper with increasing desperation. Shadow had been trained to sit and freeze when he detected explosives. He wasn't doing that. He was trying to get inside. Shadow, what is it? Crawford knelt beside his partner. What do you smell? Shadow looked at him with eyes that seemed almost human. The dog whined again, then pressed his nose to the zipper, sniffing frantically. Crawford made a decision. He reached for the zipper. His hands were shaking. 20 years on the force, and his hands were shaking like a rookie's. He pulled the zipper slowly, inch by inch, his heart hammering against his ribs. The suitcase fell open. Crawford stumbled backward. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, no." Inside the suitcase, curled into a fetal position, was a small boy. 5 years old, maybe 6. His lips were blue, his skin was gray, his eyes were closed, and pinned to his tiny chest was a handwritten note. Nobody wanted him. "I need a medic," Crawford screamed. "I need a medic now." He pulled the boy from the suitcase, cradling him against his chest. The child weighed almost nothing. His body was cold, too cold. "Come on, buddy," Crawford begged. "Come on, stay with me." He checked for a pulse. Nothing. He tilted the boy's head back, opened his airway, and began CPR. 1 breath. 2 breaths. Chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Shadow pressed against Crawford's side, whining continuously. "Where's that medic?" Crawford roared. Passengers had gathered in a circle, phones out filming. Crawford didn't care. All he could see was this tiny face, this child who should have been home watching cartoons, not dying in a suitcase in Penn Station. "Come on," he whispered between compressions. "Breathe. Please breathe." 1 more compression. The boy gasped. His eyes flew open wild, terrified, the eyes of an animal that had been trapped in the dark. "You're okay," Crawford said, tears streaming down his face. "You're okay, buddy. I've got you. You're safe now." The boy didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just stared at Crawford with those haunted eyes, and then his gaze shifted to Shadow. For a moment, something changed in the child's expression. The terror softened. His tiny hand reached out and touched Shadow's fur. Shadow leaned into the touch, and for the first time, his whining stopped. Paramedics arrived 90 seconds later. They tried to take the boy, but he screamed a raw, primal sound that made everyone freeze. "He won't let go of the dog," a paramedic said. Crawford looked at Shadow, then at the boy. "Can the dog ride with him?" The paramedic hesitated. "That's not... He's a service animal, NYPD K9. He goes where I go, and right now I'm going with this kid." Nobody argued. In the ambulance, Crawford held the boy's hand while Shadow lay across the child's feet. The paramedics worked frantically, IV lines, oxygen mask, warming blankets. "Hypothermia," one of them said. "Severe. Another 10 minutes in that suitcase and he'd be dead." Crawford stared at Shadow. The dog had known. Somehow, impossibly, Shadow had known that a child was dying inside that suitcase. 1 bark. 1 chance. And Shadow hadn't missed it. At the hospital, doctors rushed the boy into the emergency room. Crawford tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. "Family only." "He doesn't have family," Crawford said. "I found him in a suitcase." The nurse's face went pale. "Wait here. I'll get the attending physician." Crawford sat in the waiting room with Shadow at his feet. His uniform was stained with the boy's vomit. His hands still trembled. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that tiny body curled in the suitcase, lips blue skin gray. Who does that to a child? His phone buzzed. Captain Morrison. "Crawford, what the hell is going on? I'm getting calls from dispatch, from media relations, from the damn mayor's office. I found a kid in a suitcase. Captain, 5 years old. Someone left him to die." Silence on the line. "Is he alive?" "Barely. Doctors are working on him now." More silence. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "What do you need?" "I need to find out who did this." "I'll have Detective Warren meet you at the hospital." "And Crawford." "Yeah. Good work. You and that dog of yours." Crawford hung up and looked at Shadow. The dog was staring at the emergency room doors, ears forward, waiting. "You saved him, buddy," Crawford whispered. "You saved that little boy." Shadow didn't move. He just kept watching those doors as if he wouldn't rest until he knew the child was safe. 2 hours later, a doctor emerged. Crawford stood so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. The boy. "Stable," the doctor said. "Severe hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition. He's been neglected for a long time, weeks, maybe months, but physically he'll recover." Crawford exhaled. "Can I see him?" "He's asking for the dog." Crawford blinked. He spoke one word over and over. "Doggy. We think he means your German Shepherd. He's extremely agitated when the dog isn't in sight." Crawford nodded. "His name is Shadow." The doctor led them to the pediatric ward. The boy lay in a hospital bed that seemed far too big for him, surrounded by monitors and IV lines. His eyes were open, darting around the room with that same terrified expression. But when Shadow entered, everything changed. The boy's body relaxed. His breathing slowed. He reached out both arms toward the dog. Crawford guided Shadow to the bedside. The German Shepherd carefully climbed onto the bed, lying down beside the child with impossible gentleness. The boy wrapped his arms around Shadow's neck and buried his face in the dog's fur. For the first time since Crawford had found him, the child closed his eyes peacefully. "Has he said anything else?" Crawford asked quietly. "His name? Where he came from?" The doctor shook her head. "Nothing. We've had child psychologists in here, but he won't respond to anyone. Classic trauma response. Whatever happened to this boy, it was bad. Really bad." Crawford pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. He wasn't going anywhere. Detective Karen Warren arrived an hour later. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Crawford had worked with her before. She was good. "Tell me everything," she said. Crawford walked her through it. Shadow's alert, the suitcase, the note, the CPR. Warren took notes, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Nobody wanted him," she repeated, reading the evidence bag containing the note. "What kind of monster writes that about a child? That's what I want to find out." Warren studied the sleeping boy. "Any ID missing persons reports?" "Nothing. No tags on the suitcase, no labels on his clothes. It's like he came from nowhere." "Kids don't come from nowhere." Warren pulled out her phone. "I'll run his photo through the national database. See if anyone's looking for him." "There's something else," Crawford said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a stuffed rabbit, threadbare and stained. "He was holding this when I found him. There's a tag on it." Warren took the bag and examined the rabbit. The tag was faded, but still legible. St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, discharged. "St. Catherine's," Warren muttered. "That place closed 6 months ago. Some kind of scandal with the funding. Records were sealed." Crawford felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of scandal? Nobody knows. The hospital shut down overnight. Staff scattered. Patients were transferred to other facilities. The whole thing was hushed up. Crawford looked at the sleeping boy. "He came from that hospital. He has to be in their records." "I'll make some calls," Warren said. "But Crawford, if this involves St. Catherine's, we might be opening a very ugly can of worms." "I don't care how ugly it gets. Someone stuffed this kid in a suitcase and left him to die. I want to know who." Warren nodded slowly. "I'll be in touch." After she left, Crawford sat alone with the boy in Shadow. The child was still sleeping, one hand tangled in Shadow's fur. His breathing was steady now, his color improving. Crawford studied his face. "Who are you, little guy? Where did you come from, and who hurt you so badly that you can't even speak?" His phone buzzed. A text from Warren ran his photo. "No matches and missing persons. Running facial recognition now. Will take 24 hours. Crawford typed back. "What about St. Catherine's records? Sealed by court order. Working on a warrant. Don't hold your breath." Crawford put his phone away and leaned back in the chair. Sealed records. A hospital that shut down in scandal. A child with no identity. This wasn't a simple abandonment case. This was something bigger. Something darker. Shadow lifted his head and looked at Crawford. The dog's eyes seemed to hold a question. "I know, buddy," Crawford whispered. "I know there's more. We'll find out. I promise." At 3 a.m, the boy woke up screaming. Crawford jumped from his chair as the child thrashed in the bed, eyes wide with terror, hands clawing at invisible attackers. Hey, Crawford said, reaching for him. "You're safe. You're okay. Nobody's going to hurt you." The boy's eyes locked onto Crawford's face. For a moment, the screaming stopped. Then the child's gaze dropped to Shadow, who was already pressing his body against the boy's side. The tension drained from the child's body. He collapsed against the pillows, one hand gripping Shadow's fur so tightly his knuckles went white. "Doggy," he whispered. It was barely audible. "That's right," Crawford said softly. "That's Shadow. He's going to stay with you. He's not going anywhere." The boy's eyes flicked to Crawford. "You..." Crawford felt his heart crack. "Me too, buddy. I'm not going anywhere either." The child studied him for a long moment. Then slowly he pointed at his own chest. "Noah." Crawford leaned forward. "Is that your name, Noah?" The boy nodded once. "That's a great name, Noah. My name is James. But you can call me Crawford. Everyone does." Noah's eyes drifted back to Shadow. "Doggy saved me?" "Yeah." Crawford whispered, his voice thick. "Yeah, he did." The dark was so long, Noah's voice was barely a whisper. "I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die." Crawford's hands clenched into fists. "You're not going to die, Noah. Not ever. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Noah looked at him with eyes far too old for a 5-year-old. "The lady said nobody wanted me. She said I was broken." "What lady, Noah? Who said that?" But Noah's eyes were already closing. "Nobody wanted me," he mumbled as sleep pulled him under. "Broken." Crawford sat back, his mind racing. The lady. There was a woman involved. Someone who had called this child broken. Someone who had stuffed him in a suitcase and left him to die. He was going to find her. And when he did, God help her. Morning brought Detective Warren and a file folder thick enough to stop a bullet. "You're not going to believe this," she said, slapping the folder on the table. "I found a nurse who used to work at St. Catherine's. Margaret Chen. 67 years old, retired, lives in Queens. I showed her Noah's photo." Crawford straightened. And Warren's face was pale. She turned white as a sheet. Said that's impossible. Said that boy was declared dead 6 months ago. The words hit Crawford like a punch to the gut. Dead? According to St. Catherine's records, Noah Sullivan died of heart failure 6 months ago. There's a death certificate. There's even a cremation record. Warren pulled out a document. But here's the thing. Margaret Chen never saw a body. None of the nurses did. The attending physician signed off on everything and the case was closed. Crawford looked at Noah, still sleeping peacefully with Shadow. That kid's not dead. He's very much alive. Which means someone faked his death. Someone erased this child from existence. Crawford's blood was ice. Who was the attending physician? Warren flipped through the folder. Dr. Victor Harlan, chief of pediatrics at St. Catherine's until the hospital closed. Now he runs an exclusive private clinic upstate. Very wealthy patients. Very powerful friends. Where's this clinic? Crawford, slow down. We can't just... Someone faked that boy's death. Someone stuffed him in a suitcase. Someone left him to die. I'm not slowing down. Warren stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out another document. There's more. Margaret Chen gave me 3 other names. 3 other children who died at St. Catherine's. Same attending physician. Same lack of bodies. Same sealed cremation records. Crawford felt sick. How many kids are we talking about? I don't know. Chen said she suspected something was wrong for years, but she was too scared to speak up. When the hospital closed, she thought it was over. It's not over. Those kids might still be alive. They might be with Harlan right now. Warren nodded slowly. I'm going to need a warrant. And to get a warrant for a man with Harlan's connections, I'm going to need more than the word of a retired nurse. Crawford looked at Shadow, then at Noah. The boy was starting to wake up, his hand still clutching the dog's fur. Then let's get more, Crawford said. Whatever it takes. Noah's eyes opened. He looked at Crawford, then at Warren, and his body went rigid with fear. It's okay, Crawford said quickly. This is Detective Warren. She's a friend. She's going to help us find out what happened to you. Noah shook his head violently. No police. No police. Noah, we are the police. We're the good guys. The lady had police. She had police helping her. Noah was crying now, clutching Shadow so hard the dog whimpered. The police took me to the dark place. The police put me in the suitcase. Crawford and Warren exchanged horrified looks. Noah, Warren said gently, can you tell us about this lady? What did she look like? Noah's whole body was shaking. Pretty. She was pretty and nice. At first she was nice. She said she was going to find me a family. She said I was special. And then, Warren pressed. Then she got mad. She said I was broken. She said nobody wanted a broken boy. And she told the policeman to make me disappear. Crawford's hands were shaking. Noah, this is very important. Do you remember the policeman's name, what he looked like? Noah squeezed his eyes shut. He had a star, a shiny star on his chest, and he smelled like cigarettes. A badge. The officer had a badge. Crawford felt the floor shifting beneath his feet. If there were dirty cops involved in this, the investigation just became 10 times more dangerous, and 10 times more important. Noah, he said quietly, I need you to be very brave. Can you do that? The boy looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I'm going to find the lady who hurt you. I'm going to find the policeman who helped her, and I'm going to make sure they never hurt any children ever again. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Noah was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Shadow. The dog licked his face gently. Shadow trusts you, Noah whispered. Crawford nodded. Shadow and I are partners. We take care of each other, just like we're going to take care of you. Noah's hand found Crawford's. His tiny fingers wrapped around the officer's scarred knuckles. Okay, he whispered. I trust you. Warren stood up. I need to make some calls, quietly. If there are cops involved in this, we need to be very careful who we talk to. Keep me posted, Crawford said. After she left, Crawford sat with Noah and Shadow. The boy was calmer now, but his eyes kept darting to the door, as if expecting monsters to burst through at any moment. Noah, Crawford said gently, do you remember any other children from the hospital? Anyone you were friends with? Noah's face changed. A flicker of something hope. Grief crossed his features. Mia, he whispered. My friend Mia. She was there too. What happened to Mia? Noah's eyes filled with tears. They took her away. She was crying. I tried to help her, but the lady said Mia was going somewhere special. He looked at Crawford with desperate hope. Is Mia okay? Can you find Mia? Crawford's heart broke all over again. Another child. Another victim. How many more were there? I'm going to try Noah, he said. I'm going to try to find Mia and all the other kids, but I need you to tell me everything you remember. Can you do that? Noah nodded slowly. And then in a small, trembling voice, he began to tell Crawford about the hospital, about the lady with the pretty smile and the cold eyes, about the policeman with the shiny star, about the other children who disappeared one by one. And as Crawford listened, he realized this was so much bigger than one abandoned child in a suitcase. This was a conspiracy, and he was going to tear it apart. Noah talked for almost an hour. His voice was small, often breaking, but he didn't stop. He told Crawford about the white hallways that always smelled like medicine, about the nurses who smiled but never laughed, about the other children who came and went, some crying, some silent, all of them scared. and he told Crawford about the lady. She wore pretty dresses, Noah whispered, his hand never leaving Shadow's fur. And she always had candy in her pocket. At first I thought she was nice. She said she was going to find me a forever family. Crawford leaned forward. What was her name, Noah? The nurses called her Mrs. H, but I heard the policeman call her something else once. Noah scrunched his face, trying to remember. Diane. I think it was Diane. Diane. Crawford filed the name away. What about the policeman, Noah? Can you remember anything else about him? Noah's body tensed. He was big, really big, and he had a mustache, gray like my grandpa had. The boy's eyes went distant. He always came at night. I would hear his boots in the hallway, click, 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 and then one of the kids would be gone by morning. Crawford felt sick. Did he ever talk to you? Once. Noah's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He told me to stop crying or I'd be next. He said nobody could hear me anyway. Nobody cared. Shadow whined softly and pressed closer to the boy. Noah, you're being so brave, Crawford said. I just have one more question. The suitcase. Who put you in the suitcase? Noah's whole body started shaking. The policeman. He came to the place where they were keeping me. The lady said I was too much trouble. She said I asked too many questions about Mia. The policeman put tape on my mouth and put me in the bag. He said he was taking out the trash. Crawford's vision went red. Taking out the trash. Some cop had called this child trash and left him to die. I'm going to find him, Crawford said, his voice harder than he intended. I promise you, Noah, I'm going to find every single person who hurt you. Noah looked up at him with those two old eyes. What about Mia? I'll find her too. Detective Warren returned 3 hours later with news that made Crawford's blood run cold. I found the dirty cop, she said, closing the hospital room door behind her. Sergeant Dennis Marks, retired 6 months ago from the 32nd Precinct. Same week St. Catherine's shut down. That's not a coincidence. It gets worse. Marks was the department's liaison to Child Protective Services for 15 years. He had access to every at-risk kid in the system. Crawford stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Noah flinched at the sound and Crawford immediately softened his posture. Sorry, buddy, he murmured to the boy. Then to Warren. Where is Marks now? That's the problem. He's gone. Sold his house a month ago. No forwarding address. Bank accounts emptied. It's like he knew someone would come looking. Someone tipped him off. Warren nodded grimly. Which means we might have more than one dirty cop to worry about. Crawford ran his hand through his hair. What about Diane? Noah said the nurses called her Mrs. H. I cross-referenced female staff at St. Catherine's with the initial H. Warren pulled out her phone. Dr. Victor Harlan's wife is named Diane Harlan, former social worker. She specialized in placing difficult children with families. Placing children, Crawford repeated. Or selling them. That's what we need to find out. But Crawford Harlan has friends everywhere. Judges, politicians, police commissioners. If we go after him without solid evidence, he'll bury us. Crawford looked at Noah, who had fallen asleep with his arms wrapped around Shadow. The boy's face was peaceful now, but the dark circles under his eyes told a story of months without proper rest. Then we get solid evidence, Crawford said. Whatever it takes. That night, Crawford made a decision that could end his career. He drove to Queens alone, leaving Shadow at the hospital with Noah. The boy had panicked when Crawford tried to leave with the dog, so he'd made a compromise. Shadow would stay and protect Noah. Crawford would be back before morning. Margaret Chen's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a faded brick building. The hallway smelled like cabbage and old cigarettes. Crawford knocked 3 times and waited. The door opened, a cracked chain still attached. An elderly Asian woman peered out with suspicious eyes. Mrs. Chenham, Officer James Crawford. Detective Warren spoke to you earlier about... I know who you are. Margaret's voice was sharp but tired. I told the detective everything I know. I don't think you did. Crawford pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of Noah sleeping in the hospital bed. This boy was declared dead 6 months ago. You told Warren it was impossible. But I don't think you were surprised. I think you knew something like this would happen eventually. Margaret's face crumpled. Her hands shook as she undid the chain. "Come in," she whispered. "Quickly." The apartment was small but clean. Religious icons covered the walls. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the kitchen table. Margaret sank into a chair like her bones couldn't hold her up anymore. "I worked at St. Catherine's for 22 years. 22 years of caring for sick children. And I did nothing while they—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Crawford sat across from her. "Mrs. Chen, I need to understand what was happening at that hospital." It started small. Margaret stared at her hands. A child here, a child there. Dr. Harlan would say they'd been transferred to another facility, or adopted by a private family. I didn't question it. He was the chief of pediatrics. He had all the credentials, all the charm. "When did you start suspecting?" 3 years ago. There was a boy named Marcus. 7 years old, no family, ward of the state. He'd been at St. Catherine's for almost a year. I'd gotten close to him. I was even thinking about fostering him myself." Margaret's voice cracked. "And then one day, he was just gone. Dr. Harlan said he'd been adopted by a wonderful family out of state, but Marcus had severe attachment disorder. No reputable adoption agency would have placed him that quickly. It takes months, years. Did you say anything?" "I tried. I asked questions, and the next day I was called into the administrator's office. A man was there. A police officer, big with a gray mustache." Crawford's heart stopped. "Sergeant Marks." Margaret nodded. "He told me that if I valued my job, my pension, and my safety, I would forget about Marcus. He said sometimes children are better off disappearing. He said the world has too many unwanted kids anyway." Crawford wanted to put his fist through the wall. "And you stayed quiet." "I was scared." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I was 64 years old with no savings and no family. What was I supposed to do? Go to the police?" "He was the police." Crawford took a breath. He couldn't blame this woman. She was a victim too in her own way. "Mrs. Chen, I need names. Every child you remember who disappeared like Marcus. Every detail you can give me about how the operation worked." Margaret wiped her eyes. "I kept records, secretly. I knew someday. I hoped someday." She stood up and walked to a bookshelf. Behind a row of old nursing textbooks, she pulled out a thick manila envelope. 47 names, she said, handing it to Crawford. 47 children who were declared dead at St. Catherine's over the past 5 years. Not one of their bodies was seen by staff. Not one funeral was attended by anyone from the hospital. Crawford opened the envelope. Pages and pages of handwritten notes, dates, names, medical record numbers. "How did they do it?" he asked. "How do you fake a child's death?" Dr. Harlan signed the death certificates. His wife handled the families. Most of these children didn't have families, but the few who did were told their child died suddenly, cremated before they could ask questions. Sergeant Marks made sure nobody investigated. "And the children? Where did they actually go?" Margaret shook her head. "I don't know. I heard rumors about a facility upstate. A farm, some of the nurses whispered. But I never had proof." A farm. Crawford remembered what Noah had said about the dark place. He'd described it as cold, isolated, far from any sounds of traffic or people. "Do you know where this farm is?" "No, but there's someone who might." Margaret hesitated. Dr. Harlan had a secretary, young woman named Lisa Porter. She handled all his private appointments, his travel arrangements, everything. When the hospital closed, she disappeared too. But I heard she was scared. She wanted out. "Where can I find her?" "Last I heard, she was working at a diner in Brooklyn, the Red Cup Diner on Atlantic Avenue. She was terrified someone would find her." Crawford stood up. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. What you've given me. Will it be enough?" Her voice was desperate. "Will it be enough to stop them?" "I'm going to make sure it is." Margaret grabbed his arm. "Be careful, officer. These people have been doing this for years. They've never been caught. That means they know how to make problems disappear." Crawford met her eyes. "So do I." The Red Cup Diner was nearly empty at 2 in the morning. A few truckers hunched over coffee. A homeless man nursed a cup of soup in the corner. And behind the counter, a young woman with bleached blonde hair and dark circles under her eyes wiped down tables with mechanical efficiency. Crawford took a seat at the counter. "Lisa Porter." The woman froze. Her eyes darted to the door, calculating the distance. "I'm not here to hurt you," Crawford said quietly. "I'm here because of the children." Lisa's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Crawford pulled out his phone and showed her Noah's picture. "This boy was declared dead 6 months ago. I found him in a suitcase at Penn Station yesterday. Somebody stuffed him in there and left him to die." Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God. Oh God, it's really happening. What's happening, Lisa?" "Tell me." Tears streamed down her face. I knew they were doing something terrible, but I was too scared to. I needed the job. Dr. Harlan paid me more than I'd ever made in my life. I told myself I didn't know for sure. I told myself it wasn't my business. But you knew. I kept his calendar. I booked his trips. Every month he'd drive upstate to this property in the middle of nowhere. He called it the farm. He said it was his retreat. But I saw the supply orders, children's clothes, medical equipment, industrial locks. Lisa was sobbing now. I should have said something. I should have. "Where is the farm, Lisa?" "Columbia County, about 3 hours north. I have the address. I memorized it in case someone ever asked." She grabbed a napkin and wrote down an address with shaking hands. Crawford took the napkin. "Is Harlan there now?" "I don't know. I haven't worked for him in 6 months. But Crawford," she grabbed his wrist, "he has guards, armed guards, and the property is huge, hundreds of acres. If there are children there, they could be anywhere." "How many guards?" "At least 4, maybe more. They're not regular security. They're scary, ex-military types. They don't ask questions." Crawford pocketed the napkin. "Lisa, I need you to do something. There's a detective named Karen Warren. I want you to call her and tell her everything you told me. Can you do that?" Lisa nodded, still crying. "Are you going to save them, the children?" "I'm going to try." Crawford drove back to the hospital as the sun began to rise. His mind was racing with everything he'd learned. A child trafficking operation hidden inside a children's hospital. Fake deaths. A farm upstate. Armed guards. This was bigger than he'd ever imagined. And he was running out of time. When he walked into Noah's room, he found Captain Morrison sitting in the chair beside the bed. Shadow was still lying next to Noah, but his ears were flat against his head, and he was watching Morrison with obvious distrust. "Captain," Crawford said carefully, "what are you doing here?" Morrison stood up. His face was unreadable. "I got a call from Detective Warren an hour ago. She told me what you've been doing." Crawford's heart sank. "Captain, I can explain." "She told me you've been investigating a child trafficking ring connected to St. Catherine's Hospital. She told me there might be dirty cops involved, and she told me you've identified a possible location where children are being held." "That's right." Morrison stepped closer. "Why didn't you come to me?" "Because I didn't know who to trust. Noah said a cop helped the woman who hurt him. A sergeant with a gray mustache. Warren identified him as Dennis Marks." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Denny Marks. I worked with him 20 years ago. I knew he was dirty, but I could never prove it." Crawford stared at him. "You knew." "I suspected. But suspecting and proving are two different things. Marks had protection from high up. Every time anyone got close to nailing him, the investigation got shut down." Morrison exhaled heavily. "I thought when he retired it was over. I was wrong. Captain, there's a farm in Columbia County. I have the address. That's where they're keeping the children. But Harlan has armed guards and the property is huge. I can't do this alone." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Noah, still sleeping peacefully with Shadow. Then he looked at Crawford. "How sure are you about this scale of 1 to 10? 11. Morrison nodded slowly. "Then we do this right. I'll contact the FBI. This crosses state lines, which makes it federal. I'll get us a task force, a warrant, everything we need. That could take days, weeks. It'll take 48 hours. I know people who can expedite. Captain, what if Harlan finds out we're coming? What if he moves the children, or worse? Morrison's face hardened. Then we better make sure he doesn't find out. The next 48 hours were the longest of Crawford's life. Detective Warren brought Lisa Porter into protective custody. The young woman gave a full statement and handed over financial records she'd secretly copied during her time with Harlan. The records showed monthly payments to a shell company in Delaware, millions of dollars flowing through accounts that didn't officially exist. Margaret Chen came forward officially, providing her 22 years of observations and the names of 47 children who had vanished. The FBI sent Agent Patricia Walsh, a specialist in child trafficking cases. She was in her late 40s with steel gray eyes and a voice that could freeze water. She took one look at the evidence and said 3 words, "We're going in." But it was Noah who provided the final piece of the puzzle. On the second night, he woke up screaming again. Crawford rushed to his side and Shadow pressed close, trying to calm him. "Noah, you're safe. You're safe." "What did you see?" The boy was trembling uncontrollably. "The basement. I remember the basement. It was underground. You couldn't hear anything from outside. They kept us there when we were bad." Crawford's blood went cold. "A basement at the farm." Noah shook his head. "No, at the hospital, St. Catherine's. There's a room underground, behind the boiler. That's where they took kids before they went to the farm." Crawford grabbed his phone and called Warren. "The hospital, St. Catherine's. There's a hidden room in the basement, Noah just remembered." Warren was silent for a beat. "The hospital's been closed for 6 months. It's scheduled for demolition next week." "Then we need to get there now." Crawford knew he should wait. He knew protocol said to let the FBI handle it. But the hospital was being demolished in days. Whatever evidence was hidden in that basement would be gone forever. He made another decision that could end his career. At midnight, he drove to St. Catherine's Children's Hospital with Shadow in the back seat. The building loomed against the dark sky windows, boarded up chain-link fence surrounding the property. Signs warned, "Condemned, no trespassing." Crawford cut through the fence with bolt cutters and slipped inside. The hospital was a tomb. Dust covered every surface. Medical equipment lay abandoned in the hallways. The air smelled like mold and decay and something else, something that made Shadow's hackles rise. "Easy, boy," Crawford whispered. "Show me where to go." Shadow put his nose to the ground and started walking, through empty corridors, past abandoned patient rooms, down a stairwell into the basement. The boiler room was at the end of a long hallway. Massive and rusted, the old heating system took up most of the space. But Shadow wasn't interested in the boiler. He was pawing at the wall behind it. Crawford examined the wall. It looked solid, but when he pushed a section gave way. A hidden door. Behind it, a narrow passage led into darkness. Crawford turned on his flashlight and stepped through. The room beyond was small, maybe 15 by 15 feet. No windows, no ventilation. The walls were bare concrete, stained with things Crawford didn't want to identify. But it wasn't empty. Filing cabinets lined one wall. Crawford opened the first one and felt his stomach lurch. Files, dozens of them, each one labeled with a child's name, a photo, and a status, transferred to facility. He flipped through them frantically. Marcus, deleted. Sophia, deleted. Jaden, deleted. Name after name, child after child, all erased from existence. And then he found it. Mia Sullivan, age 6, status active, priority client. Noah's friend Mia was still alive, still in the system, still at the farm. Crawford photographed everything, every file, every document, every piece of evidence that proved what had happened in this room. And then Shadow barked. Crawford spun around. The dog was standing in the corner of the room, pawing at the wall. Crawford walked over and shone his flashlight on the concrete. His heart stopped. Written in crayon in a child's shaky handwriting were 2 words, "Help us." Crawford stood there for a long moment, unable to breathe. How many children had been kept in this room? How many had written that message, hoping someone would find it? How many had prayed for rescue that never came? He took a photo of the words. Then he knelt down and touched the wall as if he could somehow reach back through time and tell those children that help was finally coming. "I see you," he whispered. I hear you, and I'm coming. Shadow pressed against his leg, whining softly. Crawford stood up and headed for the exit. He had everything he needed. But as he reached the hidden door, he heard footsteps above him. Someone else was in the building. Crawford killed his flashlight and pressed against the wall. Shadow went silent, his body rigid. The footsteps grew louder, closer, coming down the basement stairs. Crawford drew his weapon. A beam of light swept across the boiler room. A man's voice called out, "I know you're down here. Come out slow, and maybe I won't kill you." Crawford recognized that voice. It was Sergeant Dennis Marks. The dirty cop had found him, and Crawford was trapped in a room with no exits holding evidence that could bring down an empire. Shadow growled low in his throat. Crawford made a choice. He stepped out of the hidden room with his hands raised, his weapon still in his grip. Marks stood 20 feet away, gun pointed at Crawford's chest. He was exactly as Noah had described, big gray mustache eyes, like a shark. "Officer Crawford," Marks said with a cold smile, "I heard you've been asking questions about things that don't concern you. These children concern everyone. Those children are products, merchandise, and you've just become a very expensive liability." Marks raised his weapon, and Shadow attacked. Shadow hit Marks like a missile. 80 pounds of fur and muscle slammed into the sergeant's chest, knocking him backward. The gun fired once, twice the shots going wild into the ceiling. Crawford dove left as concrete dust rained down. Marks screamed as Shadow's teeth found his forearm. The gun clattered to the floor. Crawford kicked it away and leveled his own weapon at the sergeant's head. "Call him off," Marks shrieked. "Call him off. Shadow, release." Shadow let go but didn't back away. He stood over Mark's lips, pulled back, growling with a ferocity Crawford had never seen before. "You're done, Marks." Crawford kept his weapon trained on the man's chest. "It's over." Marks laughed through the pain cradling his bleeding arm. "You think so? You have no idea what you've stepped into. These people have been operating for 15 years. They have judges in their pockets, police chiefs, politicians. You're one cop with an old dog. You're nothing. I have the files. Every child you helped disappear. Every payment. Every name." Something flickered in Marks's eyes. Fear. "Those files won't matter when you're dead," he spat. "Harlan has eyes everywhere. He already knows you're here. He's probably cleaning out the farm right now." Crawford's blood went cold. "What do you mean, cleaning out? What do you think happens to merchandise that becomes a liability? Same thing that almost happened to that kid in the suitcase." Crawford fought the urge to pull the trigger. Instead, he grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Crawford. I need immediate backup at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. I have a suspect in custody and evidence of a child trafficking operation. Alert FBI agent Patricia Walsh. Tell her Harlan is moving the children. Now." Static crackled. Then, "Copy that, Crawford. Units en route." Crawford looked down at Marks. "How many children are at the farm right now?" Marks said nothing. Crawford stepped closer. "How many?" "Go to hell." Shadow growled and took a step toward Marks. The sergeant flinched. "8, he shouted. "There were 8 kids at the farm last week, but they were moving them. Some big buyer was coming. International." 8 children. 8 lives, hanging in the balance. Crawford handcuffed Marks to a pipe and ran for the exit. Shadow at his heels. Every second counted now. He called Warren as he sprinted to his car. "Karen Harlan knows. He's moving the children. We need to hit the farm tonight." "Crawford, we don't have a warrant yet. Walsh is still..." "There are 8 kids about to disappear forever. Mia Sullivan is one of them. She's 6 years old, Karen. 6 years old." Silence on the line. Then Warren's voice, harder than he'd ever heard it. "I'll call Walsh. Meet us at the precinct in 20 minutes." The FBI mobilized faster than Crawford thought possible. Agent Walsh took one look at the files he'd photographed in the basement and made 3 phone calls. Within 2 hours, they had a warrant, a tactical team, and a convoy of unmarked vehicles heading north on I-87. Crawford sat in the lead SUV with Shadow, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Walsh sat beside him reviewing satellite images of the farm on her tablet. 200 acres, she said. Main house, 3 outbuildings, and what looks like a barn. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures in the main house and one of the outbuildings. Could be the children. Or it could be guards. That's why we're going in with a full team. Walsh looked at him. You know you shouldn't be here. You're not FBI. You're not even a detective. That boy in the hospital trusted me. I promised him I'd find his friend. Walsh studied him for a long moment. My daughter is 7. If anyone ever touched her... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The convoy turned off the highway onto a dark country road. Trees pressed in on both sides. No streetlights. No houses. Just darkness and silence. 2 miles out, the driver announced. Crawford's hand found Shadow's fur. The dog was tense, alert, ready. Whatever happens in there, Walsh said quietly, we get those kids out. That's the only thing that matters. Crawford nodded. That's the only thing that's ever mattered. They stopped half a mile from the property and continued on foot. 16 FBI agents plus Crawford and Shadow moving through the woods like ghosts. The night was cold, their breath forming clouds in the air. Walsh's voice came through the earpiece. Alpha team, take the main house. Bravo team, the outbuilding on the east side. Crawford, you and the dog are with me. They approached from the south, using a tree line for cover. The farm was quiet. Too quiet. No lights in the windows. No movement. Something's wrong, Crawford whispered. It looks abandoned. Thermal still shows heat signatures. Someone's in there. They reached the perimeter fence. An agent cut through the wire. One by one, they slipped onto the property. The main house loomed ahead. 2 stories, white paint, peeling windows, dark. Crawford felt Shadow tense beside him. Easy boy, not yet. Alpha team stacked up at the front door. On Walsh's signal, they breached. FBI, nobody move. Crawford heard shouts, scuffling, a woman screaming. Main house clear. We have 2 in custody. Walsh and Crawford moved toward the outbuilding. It was smaller than the house, maybe 40 feet by 60, with a heavy steel door and no windows. This is it, Crawford said. This is where they keep them. Shadow was pulling hard at his leash now, whining urgently. Walsh tried the door. Locked. She motioned to an agent with a breaching tool. 3 hits, and the door swung open. The smell hit them first. Urine, fear, unwashed bodies. Crawford had smelled it before in the worst neglect cases, the ones that haunted him for months afterward. He stepped inside. The room was divided into sections by chain link fencing. Cots lined the walls. Plastic buckets in the corners. And huddled together in the far corner, eyes wide with terror, were 6 children. Oh my God, Walsh breathed. Crawford moved forward slowly, hands raised. It's okay. We're police. We're here to help you. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. The children didn't move. They stared at him like animals that had been beaten too many times to trust anyone. Shadow whined and pulled toward them. Crawford let him go. The German shepherd walked slowly toward the children, tail, low, posture submissive, non-threatening. One of the children, a girl with matted brown hair, reached out a trembling hand. Shadow licked her fingers gently. The girl burst into tears and threw her arms around the dog's neck. It's really over, she sobbed. It's really over. Crawford knelt beside her. It's really over. What's your name, sweetheart? Mia. My name is Mia. Crawford's heart nearly stopped. Mia Sullivan. The girl looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. How do you know my name? I know someone who's been looking for you, a boy named Noah. Mia's face transformed. Noah's alive. They told me he was gone. They said he got adopted and I'd never see him again. Noah's alive. He's safe. And he's been asking about you every single day. Mia started crying harder, but these were different tears. Relief, hope, joy. We've got 6 kids here, Walsh reported into her radio. All alive. Need medical teams immediately. Copy that. But Walsh, we've got a problem at the main house. You need to see this." Crawford stayed with the children while paramedics arrived. He watched them being wrapped in warm blankets, given water, examined by doctors. Some of them couldn't even remember their own names. Some of them flinched at every touch. All of them had been through hell, but they were alive. Walsh returned with a grim expression. "We captured 2 of Harlan's guards. They're talking. And Harlan, not here. Neither is his wife." Crawford felt a chill. "Where are they?" "The guards say Harlan left this morning. Private airfield about 30 miles from here. He's running." "Then we need to stop him." "There's more." Walsh hesitated. "The kids. There were supposed to be 8. The guards say 2 were taken this morning." Crawford's stomach dropped. "Taken where?" "They don't know. Harlan's wife handled the transactions. She took the children personally." 2 more children. Still out there. Still in danger. "Mia," Crawford said suddenly. He turned and rushed back to the building where the children were being treated. Mia was sitting on a cot wrapped in a blanket, shadow lying at her feet. She looked up when Crawford approached. "Mia, I need to ask you something important. Were there other children here, besides the 6 of you?" Mia nodded slowly. "Tommy and Grace. They were here yesterday. But the pretty lady came this morning. She said Tommy and Grace were going to their new families. The pretty lady. Diane Harlan. She told us to call her Mrs. H. She always brought candy. But she was mean. Really mean when no one was watching." Crawford knelt down. "Mia, do you know where Mrs. H was taking Tommy and Grace?" Mia shook her head, but then she frowned. "I heard her talking on the phone once. She said something about an airport, a special airport where no one asks questions. She called it something weird. Teeter something." "Teterboro?" Crawford asked. "Teterboro Airport." "Maybe, I don't remember exactly." Crawford was already on his feet. Teterboro was a private airport in New Jersey just across the Hudson. It was used by wealthy businessmen and celebrities who wanted to avoid commercial flights. And it was notoriously lax on documentation for private charters. He grabbed Walsh. "Teterboro. Diane Harlan is taking 2 children to Teterboro Airport. If she gets on a private plane, we'll never find them." Walsh's face went pale. "That's outside our jurisdiction. We'd need to coordinate with New Jersey authorities, get additional warrants. We don't have time for that." Walsh stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. "This is Agent Walsh. I need an emergency intercept at Teterboro Airport. Suspect is Diane Harlan. She's traveling with 2 minors, possible victims of trafficking. Consider armed and dangerous." She hung up. "They'll try to stop her. But Crawford, if she's got friends at that airport, if she's got people on the inside, then I need to get there myself. That's a 2-hour drive. Then I better start now." Crawford ran for his car with Shadow beside him. He didn't know if he could make it in time. He didn't know if the authorities at Teterboro would be able to stop Diane. But he knew 2 children were about to disappear forever, and he was the only one who could stop it. He drove like a man possessed. Lights and sirens, weaving through traffic, pushing the speedometer past 100 on the empty stretches of highway. His phone rang. "Warren. Crawford, Walsh told me what you're doing. Are you insane?" "Probably." "There are 2 state police units converging on Teterboro. FBI is sending a team from Newark. Let them handle it. And if Diane has a cop on her payroll at that airport like she had Mark's..." Warren was silent. "I'm not letting those kids disappear, Karen. I can't. Not after everything." He heard Warren sigh. "I've got Lisa Porter here. She just remembered something. Diane Harlan always used the same pilot for her private flights. Guy named Marcus Webb, ex-military. He's on Harlan's payroll. Can you ground him, revoke his license? Working on it. But Crawford, these people are good at what they do. They've been disappearing children for 15 years. They have backup plans for their backup plans. So do I." He hung up and pushed the accelerator harder. An hour and 40 minutes later, Crawford screeched into the parking lot of Teterboro Airport. State police cars were already there, lights flashing. But something was wrong. An officer ran toward him. "You, Crawford?" "Yeah." Where's Diane Harlan? The officer's face was grim. We were too late. Her plane took off 20 minutes ago. Crawford felt the ground shift beneath him. No, that's not possible. She had clearance already filed. By the time we got here, they were wheels up. Where is the plane going? Flight plan says Montreal, but once she's in Canadian airspace, she could go anywhere. Crawford stumbled backward. He'd failed. After everything, he'd failed. Tommy and Grace were gone, flying toward some unknown fate, and he couldn't do anything to stop it. Shadow pressed against his leg, whining softly. There has to be something, Crawford said. Can we contact Canadian authorities, Interpol? We're working on it, but these private flights, the paperwork gets lost. People get paid to look the other way. It could take hours, days. Days. Those children didn't have days. Crawford's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He opened it and felt his blood freeze. It was a photo. 2 children, a boy and a girl, sitting in airplane seats. Their eyes were wide with fear. Their mouths were covered with tape. Below the photo, a message. You should have let it go, Officer Crawford. Now these 2 will pay for your curiosity. Don't try to follow. You'll never find them. Crawford stared at the screen. His hands were shaking. Diane Harlan wasn't just running. She was taunting him. She wanted him to know that she'd won. Something inside Crawford snapped. He forwarded the text to Walsh and Warren. Then he called Walsh directly. I just got a message from Diane Harlan. She sent a photo of the children. Can you trace it? We'll try. But Crawford, if she's using a burner phone, try anyway, and get me everything you can on her pilot. Marcus Webb, military record, known associates. Anywhere he might land that's not on official records. He hung up and stood in the parking lot, mind racing. There had to be something. Some angle he hadn't considered. Some weakness in Diane's plan. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered. What do you want? A woman's voice, calm, cold, amused. Officer Crawford, I have to admit you've impressed me. Most people would have given up by now. Diane Harlan. The one and only. I wanted to call and thank you personally. Thank me. You've forced me to accelerate my retirement. I was planning to operate for another few years, but clearly that's no longer possible. So I'm liquidating my assets and disappearing. These 2 children will fetch a nice price, enough to start over somewhere warm. Crawford's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. If you hurt those kids, you'll what? You're standing in an airport parking lot while I'm 30,000 feet above you. There's nothing you can do. I found Noah. I found Mia. I'll find Tommy and Grace. Diane laughed. Noah was a mistake. My husband's stupid sergeant was supposed to make him disappear permanently, not abandon him in a train station. If that idiot had done his job, none of this would have happened. Marks is in custody. He's telling us everything. Dennis doesn't know everything. Nobody does except me. The accounts, the buyers, the routes, it's all in my head, and it's about to disappear forever. Crawford took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. What about your husband? Victor is going to prison. You're just going to leave him. A pause. When Diane spoke again, her voice was colder. Victor was a useful tool, but tools can be replaced. He's served his purpose. Does he know you're abandoning him? Victor knows exactly what I'm capable of, which is why he'll keep his mouth shut and take whatever deal the prosecutors offer. He knows what happens to people who betray me. Crawford heard something in her voice. A crack. Tiny, but there. You're scared, he said. Under all that confidence, you're terrified, because you know we're getting closer. You know it's only a matter of time. Time is something you don't have, Officer Crawford. In 6 hours, I'll be in a country with no extradition treaty. In 12 hours, these children will belong to someone else. And in 24 hours, you'll be just another cop who tried and failed. The line went dead. Crawford stood there, phone pressed to his ear, listening to silence. Then he called Walsh. I just spoke to Diane Harlan. She's heading somewhere with no extradition treaty. 6 hours. Cuba, Venezuela, Russia. I don't know, but Walsh, she mentioned something. She said she was liquidating assets. That means she has money somewhere. Accounts, records. We've already frozen everything we can find. But she said the accounts are in her head, that nobody knows except her, which means there are accounts you haven't found. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Her pilot, Marcus Webb, he's been flying her for 10 years. If anyone knows her routes, her contacts, her safe havens, then we need to find someone who knows Webb. I'm on it. Crawford hung up and looked at Shadow. The dog was watching him with those intelligent eyes waiting for direction. We're not giving up, boy. We're never giving up. His phone buzzed. Warren. Crawford, we found something. Webb has a sister. She lives in Newark. She and Marcus had a falling out years ago, but she might know something. Send me the address. 20 minutes later, Crawford was knocking on the door of a small apartment in a run-down Newark building. A woman in her 50s answered, suspicion written all over her face. Whatever you're selling, I don't want it. I'm not selling anything. I'm looking for information about your brother. The woman's face hardened. Marcus, what's that bastard done now? He's helping a woman traffic children. The color drained from her face. What? Your brother is piloting a plane right now with 2 kidnapped children on board. A 6-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. They're going to be sold to the highest bidder unless I can find them. The woman gripped the doorframe. Oh my God. Oh my God, I always knew he was into something bad. But children, he's trafficking children. I need to know where he might be going. Does he have contacts? Safe houses anywhere he's mentioned. The woman shook her head frantically. I haven't talked to Marcus in 5 years. He got involved with some rich people, started acting like he was better than everyone. But she stopped. But what? There was this place he talked about once, when we were still speaking. He said if things ever got too hot, he had a place to disappear, an island somewhere in the Caribbean. He called it his insurance policy. Do you know which island? No, but he said it belonged to one of his clients, a rich doctor. Crawford's mind raced. Victor Harlan, Diane's husband. If Harlan owned property in the Caribbean, thank you, he said. You might have just saved 2 children's lives. He ran back to his car, calling Walsh as he went. Harlan has property in the Caribbean. Can you check real estate records? Shell companies, anything tied to his name. On it. But Crawford, even if we find the location, we can't just fly into another country and arrest people. There's jurisdiction, international law. Then we contact the local authorities, Interpol, Coast Guard, anyone who can intercept that plane before it lands. That's exactly what we're doing. But you need to understand this might not end the way you want. Crawford got in his car and leaned his head against the steering wheel. I promised a little boy I would find his friend. I promised 6 children in a basement that they were safe. I am not going to break those promises. Not today. Not ever. Walsh was silent for a long moment. There's something else, she finally said. Victor Harlan. He's talking. Crawford lifted his head. What? He's in custody at the FBI field office. When we told him his wife had abandoned him, he broke down. He's giving us everything. Names, dates, buyers. And Crawford, he knows where Diane is going. Where? An island called Suitcase, off the coast of Puerto Rico. The Harlans own a compound there. It's where they finalized all their major transactions. Crawford's heart pounded. Puerto Rico is U.S. territory. Exactly. We have jurisdiction. I've already contacted the FBI office in San Juan. They're assembling a team. How long until they reach the island? 3 hours, maybe 4. Diane lands in 6 hours. We'll have people waiting for her when she does. Crawford closed his eyes. For the first time in hours, he felt something other than despair. They had a chance. Crawford, Walsh said, go back to the hospital. Be with Noah. Let us handle this. I can't just sit and wait. You've done everything you can, more than anyone could have asked. Now let the system work. Crawford looked at Shadow, who had jumped into the back seat and was watching him with tired eyes. The dog had been running on adrenaline for days, just like Crawford. Okay, he said finally. But Walsh, call me the second you know anything. I will. He drove back to New York as the sun began to rise. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Every minute that passed was another minute those children were in danger. When he walked into Noah's hospital room, the boy was awake. His eyes lit up when he saw Shadow. You came back! Shadow bounded to the bed and climbed up beside Noah, licking his face. I told you I would, Crawford said, sinking into the chair. Noah looked at him with those two old eyes. Did you find Mia? Crawford smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. I found her. She's safe. She's with doctors right now, but she's asking about you. Noah's face transformed. Really? She's really okay. She's really okay, and she can't wait to see you. Tears streamed down Noah's cheeks. I thought I'd never see her again. They told me she was gone. She's not gone, and pretty soon you two are going to be together again. Noah threw his arms around Crawford's neck, hugging him with surprising strength for such a small body. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up. Crawford held him tight, feeling his own eyes burn. I'll never give up on you, Noah. Never. His phone buzzed. Walsh. He answered with his heart in his throat. Tell me. We got them. Coast Guard intercepted Diane's plane as it approached Suitcase. She tried to divert, but they forced her down. She's in custody. And Crawford, the children are safe. Tommy and Grace are safe. It's over. Crawford closed his eyes as tears rolled down his face. It was over. They'd won. Noah pulled back and looked at him. What happened? Why are you crying? Crawford wiped his eyes. Happy tears, buddy. The very best kind of happy tears. His phone buzzed again. A photo from Walsh. 2 children wrapped in blankets being carried off a plane by FBI agents. They were crying, but they were alive. Hey, Noah, Crawford said. You want to see something amazing? He showed the boy the photo. More kids, Noah whispered. You saved more kids. We all did. You, me, Shadow, everyone who refused to give up. Noah hugged Shadow tight. Shadow's a hero. Yeah, Crawford said, watching the dog lick Noah's tears away. Yeah, he really is. But even as he said the words, Crawford knew this wasn't completely over. Diane Harlan was in custody. Victor was cooperating. Marks was talking. But somewhere out there, 89 children had been sold over 15 years. 89 lives stolen. 89 families destroyed. This was just the beginning. The news broke at 7 in the morning. Every television in the hospital seemed to be tuned to the same channel, the same story, the same horrifying revelations. Federal authorities have arrested Dr. Victor Harlan and his wife, Diane Harlan, in connection with what officials are calling the largest child trafficking operation in American history. Sources say at least 89 children were sold over a 15-year period through a network that included corrupt law enforcement officials, forged death certificates, and a network of international buyers. Crawford stood in the hospital hallway watching the screen with hollow eyes. 89 children. He'd known the number, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel different. Heavier. Each one of those numbers was a child who'd been erased from existence, sold like property to strangers in foreign countries. Officer Crawford. He turned. A young woman stood behind him, maybe 30, with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. She clutched a photograph against her chest. I'm sorry to bother you, she whispered, but they said you were the one, the officer who found them, who stopped them. Crawford nodded slowly. Can I help you? The woman thrust the photograph toward him. It showed a smiling toddler with curly brown hair and gap-toothed grin. My son, Marcus. He was at St. Catherine's 4 years ago. They told me he died. Heart failure. They cremated him before I could even see his body. Her voice cracked, but I never believed it. I felt it in my gut that something was wrong. And now, she couldn't finish. Sobs overtook her. Crawford took her hands gently. What's your name? Jennifer. Jennifer Okonkwo. Jennifer, I can't promise anything, but the FBI is going through every record, every transaction, Every buyer. If your son is alive, they will find him. He'd be 6 now, 6 years old. I've missed 4 years of his life. Jennifer wiped her eyes fiercely. 4 years of birthdays, first days of school, learning to ride a bike. They stole all of that from us. Crawford felt his own eyes burning. I know, and I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Jennifer's voice hardened. Find them. Find all of them. Every single child they stole. Bring them home. She walked away before Crawford could respond. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the television at the faces of Victor and Diane Harlan being led into a federal courthouse. Diane's expression was blank, emotionless. Victor looked broken, a man who'd finally realized that his wife had left him to take the fall alone. Crawford. He turned. Captain Morrison stood behind him, looking older than Crawford had ever seen him. Captain, what are you doing here, Bo? Came to see the boy and to talk to you. Morrison gestured toward the waiting area. Walk with me. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Morrison spoke. I owe you an apology. Crawford blinked. Sir. I told you Shadow was too old. I said it was time to retire him. Morrison shook his head. That dog saved 8 children. He found evidence that brought down a 15-year criminal enterprise. And I wanted to put him out to pasture. You couldn't have known. That's not the point. The point is, I stopped trusting my people. I let bureaucracy and budget concerns override my instincts. Morrison stopped walking and faced Crawford. I've recommended Shadow for the department's Medal of Valor, first K-9 to receive it in 20 years. Crawford felt his throat tighten. He deserves it. So do you. I've also recommended you for promotion, detective grade effective immediately. Captain, You don't get to argue. You cracked the biggest case this department has ever seen. You did it by following your gut and trusting your partner. That's exactly what a good detective does. Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. Now go see that boy. I hear he's been asking for you. Crawford found Noah sitting up in bed. Shadow curled beside him watching cartoons with the volume low. When the boy saw Crawford, his face lit up. You're still here. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. Noah patted the bed. Crawford sat on the edge and immediately Noah leaned against him, small body seeking warmth and comfort. I saw the news, Noah said quietly. They showed pictures of the lady. The mean lady. Crawford tensed. You shouldn't be watching that. I know, but I wanted to see. Noah looked up at him. She's going to jail right forever. For a very long time. Good. The word was fierce, older than any 5-year-old should sound. She hurt so many kids. She made us think nobody wanted us. She made us think we were broken. Crawford put his arm around Noah. You were never broken. Not for 1 second. She was the broken one. She just wanted you to feel as empty as she did. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, what's going to happen to me now? The question Crawford had been dreading. What do you mean? I don't have a family. My mom died. I don't have anyone. Noah's voice was small, scared. Are they going to put me in another hospital? Another place like St. Catherine's? No. Crawford said it with more force than he intended. No, Noah. That's never going to happen to you, I promise. But where will I go? Crawford looked at Shadow, who lifted his head and met his eyes. The dog seemed to be asking the same question Crawford had been asking himself for days. We'll figure it out, Crawford said finally. Together. Agent Walsh arrived an hour later with updates that made Crawford's head spin. Victor Harlan is cooperating fully, she said. He's given us names, dates, everything. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he's helping us identify buyers across 12 countries. How many children have been recovered? Walsh hesitated. 7 so far. It's early days, but the international agencies are mobilizing. Interpol has this as their top priority. 7 out of 89. Crawford did the math and felt sick. What about the rest? Some of those transactions go back 15 years, Crawford. The children aren't children anymore. Some of them might not even know they were trafficked, and some of them... Walsh didn't finish the sentence. Some of them didn't survive. It's possible. We won't know until we track down every buyer. Crawford rubbed his eyes. What about the kids from the farm? The 6 we rescued. Being processed through child services. Most of them have no living relatives. They'll go into foster care. No. Crawford stood up. Not foster care. Not the system that failed them in the first place. Crawford, I understand how you feel, but Mia Sullivan, she's 6 years old. She watched children disappear around her for months. She thought she was next. You can't just dump her in a group home and hope for the best. Walsh sighed. What do you want me to do? I can't change the system overnight. Then change it for one kid. Find Mia a real home. A family that understands what she's been through. Someone who will actually protect her. Walsh studied him for a long moment. You really care about these kids. Someone has to. I'll see what I can do. But Crawford, there are 6 children who need placement. And that's just from this case. The system is overwhelmed. Crawford thought about Jennifer Okonkwo clutching her son's photograph. About Noah asking where he would go. About Mia finally reunited with her friend, but facing an uncertain future. Then we need to change the system. The interrogation of Diane Harlan happened 2 days later. Crawford wasn't supposed to be there, but Walsh pulled strings. He watched through the one-way glass as federal prosecutors faced the woman who had orchestrated 15 years of horror. Diane sat with perfect posture, her hair immaculate, her expression serene. She looked like she was attending a board meeting, not facing life in prison. Mrs. Harlan, we have documented evidence of 89 children processed through your network. We have financial records showing payments totaling over $40 million. We have testimony from your husband, your employees, and your pilot. The prosecutor leaned forward. The question isn't whether you're going to prison. The question is whether you'll ever see the outside world again. Diane smiled. It was the most chilling thing Crawford had ever seen. You think you understand what I did, she said. You think I'm some kind of monster. But let me tell you something, prosecutor. Every single one of those children was headed for a life of poverty, abuse, and neglect. The foster system would have chewed them up and spit them out. Instead, I gave them to families who wanted them, families who could provide for them. You sold them. I placed them, for a fee. Is that really so different from what adoption agencies do? The prosecutor's face reddened. Adoption agencies don't fake children's deaths. They don't stuff kids in suitcases when they become inconvenient. For the first time, something flickered in Diane's expression. That was Dennis Marks's mistake. He was supposed to handle Noah quietly. Instead, he panicked and made a mess. A mess you nearly killed a 5-year-old boy. Collateral damage. Diane shrugged. In any business, there are setbacks. Crawford's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to break through that glass and wrap his hands around her throat. Where are the children, Mrs. Harlan? The ones we haven't found. Diane's smile returned. I imagine they're with their new families, living their new lives. Honestly, prosecutor, they're probably better off than they would have been in your system. Names. We want names. I'm sure you do. Diane leaned back in her chair. But here's the thing. Those names are the only leverage I have, so let's talk about what you're prepared to offer me. You're facing life without parole. Multiple counts of kidnapping, child trafficking, conspiracy. Yes, very scary. Diane waved her hand dismissively. But you want those children back, don't you? 89 families want closure. The public wants to see those faces on the news reunited with their loved ones. That's worth something. Crawford watched the prosecutor struggle with the impossible choice. Give a monster a deal or leave dozens of children lost forever. What do you want? Minimum security facility, possibility of parole after 20 years, and protection from the other inmates. Child traffickers aren't popular in prison, I'm told. The prosecutor stood up. I'll discuss it with my superiors. You do that. Diane's eyes drifted to the one-way glass. For a moment, Crawford could have sworn she was looking directly at him. And tell Officer Crawford I said hello. That dog of his cost me everything. I hope he's proud. Crawford felt cold down to his bones. He left the observation room and walked outside, needing air. Shadow was waiting in the car and Crawford sat beside him for a long time, not moving, just breathing. She's going to get a deal, he told Shadow. She's going to trade children's lives for a comfortable prison cell, and there's nothing I can do about it. Shadow whined and rested his head on Crawford's lap. How do you do it, boy? How do you face evil like that and not let it destroy you? Shadow looked up at him with those wise brown eyes. Crawford could almost hear the answer, because we focus on the ones we can save. His phone buzzed. A text from Warren. Mia's aunt came forward. She's been looking for her for 2 years. DNA test confirmed. Mia has a family. Crawford read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. 1 child, 1 family, 1 reunion. It wasn't 89. It wasn't even close. But it was something. He drove to the hospital. Mia was being discharged today, going home with an aunt she barely remembered to a life that had been stolen from her. When he walked in, Mia was sitting on the bed holding a small suitcase that social workers had packed for her. She looked terrified. Hey, Mia. Her face brightened when she saw Shadow. Doggy? Shadow trotted over and let Mia wrap her arms around him. I heard you're going home today, Crawford said. Mia nodded, but her eyes were uncertain. My aunt. I don't really remember her. That's okay. You'll get to know her again. What if she doesn't like me? Mia's voice dropped to a whisper. What if nobody wants me either? Crawford knelt down so he was at her eye level. Mia, your aunt has been searching for you for 2 years. 2 years. She never stopped. She never gave up. She wanted you so badly that she never quit looking. Tears welled in Mia's eyes. Really? Really? And you know what Noah wants to see you before you go. Mia's face transformed. Noah. Crawford led her down the hall to Noah's room. When Noah saw Mia in the doorway, he scrambled out of bed and ran to her. They collided in the middle of the room, 2 small children clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. I thought you were gone, Noah sobbed. I thought I'd never see you again. I'm here. I'm here. Mia was crying too, her arms wrapped tight around her friend. The policeman found me, the one with the doggy. Noah looked up at Crawford with eyes full of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for keeping your promise. Crawford had to turn away for a moment. He'd seen a lot in 20 years on the force. He thought he'd hardened himself to emotion. But watching these 2 children, survivors of unimaginable horror, finding comfort in each other, it broke something open inside him. Mia. A woman's voice from the doorway. Crawford turned. A woman in her 40s stood there, tears streaming down her face. She looked like an older version of Mia. Same dark hair, same gentle eyes. Aunt Rosa, Mia whispered. Oh, baby. Rosa rushed forward and scooped Mia into her arms. Oh, my baby girl, I found you. I finally found you. Mia buried her face in her aunt's shoulder, sobbing. They said nobody wanted me. They said I was alone. Never. Rosa kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hair. Never alone. I wanted you every single day. I never stopped. Crawford watched the reunion with Shadow pressed against his leg. This was why they did the job, this moment, this healing, this love that refused to die no matter how hard evil tried to kill it. Noah tugged at Crawford's hand. What about me? The question hit Crawford like a punch to the gut. He looked down at the boy, at those hopeful, terrified eyes, and realized he'd been avoiding this moment. Noah, I don't have an aunt. I don't have anyone. Noah's voice trembled. Mia gets to go home. But I don't have a home. Crawford knelt down. Shadow moved to Noah's side, pressing close. Noah, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen carefully. Noah nodded, tears already falling. After your mom died, you were put into the system. You were sent to foster homes, then to St. Catherine's. People failed you. Again and again, people who should have protected you let you down. I know. Noah's voice was barely a whisper. I'm not going to let that happen again. Crawford took a deep breath. I've been thinking about this for days, and I talked to some people, social workers, lawyers, my captain. Noah's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, Crawford felt his heart pounding. I mean, I want to be your family, Noah, if you'll have me. For a moment, Noah didn't react. He just stared at Crawford with an expression that was impossible to read. Then his lower lip trembled. You want me more than anything. But I'm broken. The lady said I was broken. She said nobody... You're not broken. Crawford pulled Noah into his arms. You're brave. You're strong. You survived something terrible and you're still here. That makes you the opposite of broken. Noah clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder. You really want me for real. For real. Forever. You and me and Shadow. A family. Shadow barked once, that same sharp, urgent bark that had started everything. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded like joy. Rosa was watching from across the room, her arms still around Mia. Her eyes met Crawford's, and she nodded slowly, a smile breaking through her tears. Looks like we're going to be seeing a lot of each other, she said. These two are inseparable. Crawford looked at Noah, then at Mia. I think that's exactly how it should be. That night, Crawford sat in his apartment, the apartment that had felt empty and cold since Catherine died 3 years ago. Noah was asleep in the guest room, Shadow curled at his feet. The paperwork for emergency foster placement sat on the kitchen table, already signed. It would take months to finalize the adoption. Background checks, home visits, court hearings. But the social worker had looked at Crawford's record, at Shadow's commendations, at the way Noah had clung to them both, and said something Crawford would never forget. Some families are born, some are made, and some are found in the most unexpected places. Crawford's phone buzzed. Walsh. We made a deal with Diane Harlan, she said without preamble. She's giving us everything. Names, locations, bank accounts. We're going to find those children. Crawford closed his eyes. How many years? 30. Possibility of parole after 20. She should rot forever. I know, but Crawford, we're going to bring them home. Every single child we can find, because of what you started. After she hung up, Crawford walked to the guest room door. He opened it quietly and looked in. Noah was sleeping peacefully for the first time since Crawford had found him. No nightmares, no screaming. Just a small boy wrapped in warm blankets with a loyal dog keeping watch. Crawford leaned against the doorframe. I don't know how to be a father, he whispered to himself. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'll be any good at it. Shadow lifted his head and looked at him. But I know I'm not going to give up. Not on him. Not ever. He closed the door softly and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, millions of lights, millions of lives. Somewhere out there, families were still searching for children who had been stolen. Somewhere out there, children were still waiting to be found. And somewhere in this apartment, a little boy finally had a place to call home. 6 months passed like water through fingers, sometimes rushing, sometimes crawling, but always moving forward. Crawford learned things about fatherhood that no training manual could teach. He learned that 5-year-olds had nightmares that could wake the whole building. He learned that macaroni and cheese was an acceptable dinner 4 nights a week. He learned that bedtime stories had to be read twice, sometimes 3 times before Noah would close his eyes. And he learned that love didn't arrive in a thunderclap. It crept in slowly through small moments, Noah's hand reaching for his in a crowded grocery store, a sleepy voice calling him Dad by accident, Shadow's tail wagging whenever they walked through the door together. The adoption process was grueling. Home visits, background checks, psychological evaluations, court appearances. There were moments when Crawford wanted to throw the paperwork across the room and scream that this was his son, that no bureaucrat could understand what they'd been through together. But he didn't. He filled out every form. He answered every question. He jumped through every hoop because Noah was worth it. The boy was healing slowly but surely. The nightmares came less frequently now. He'd started kindergarten at a public school 3 blocks from Crawford's apartment, and his teacher said he was making friends. He still flinched at loud noises. He still checked the locks on the doors every night before bed, but he was learning to trust again, and Shadow never left his side. The German Shepherd had become Noah's constant companion. When Noah had his first day of school, Shadow walked him to the bus stop and waited there until the bus returned. When Noah woke up screaming at 2 in the morning, Shadow was already on the bed, pressing close, letting the boy bury his face in his fur until the terror passed. "He loves you," Crawford told Noah one evening, watching the two of them play in the living room. Noah looked up with a smile that still made Crawford's heart ache. "He saved me. He found me when nobody else could. That's what he does. He finds people who need to be found." Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that what you do too?" Crawford blinked. "What do you mean, you found me too, in the hospital, when I didn't have anyone?" Noah's voice was serious, far too wise for a child his age. "You could have just left me there. Let the social workers figure it out. But you stayed. I couldn't leave you." "Why not?" Crawford sat down on the floor, putting himself at Noah's level. Shadow padded over and lay down between them. "Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who deserved better. Someone who'd been let down by everyone who was supposed to protect him. And I decided I wasn't going to be another person who walked away." Noah's eyes were bright with tears. "My mom used to say that. She said I deserved better." Crawford felt his chest tighten. Noah rarely talked about his mother. The memories were too painful, wrapped up in loss and everything that came after. "Tell me about her." Noah wiped his eyes. "She had brown hair, like mine, and she sang songs when she made dinner. She wasn't a very good singer, but I didn't care." A small smile crossed his face. "She called me her little prince. She said no matter what happened, I would always be her little prince." "She sounds like she loved you very much." "She did." Noah's voice cracked. "And then she died. And everyone told me I'd be okay, that someone would take care of me. But they lied." "Not everyone lied, Noah. I didn't lie." Noah looked at him. "I know. That's why I said yes." "Said yes to what?" "When the social worker asked if I wanted to live with you, she said I could say no. She said there were other families. But I said yes." Crawford hadn't known that. He'd assumed the placement had been made for him, that the social workers had decided. But Noah had chosen him. "Why me?" Crawford asked, his voice thick. "Because Shadow trusts you. And Shadow never trusts anyone he doesn't know is good." Noah leaned against Crawford's shoulder. "And because you look at me like my mom used to. Like I matter." Crawford wrapped his arm around Noah and held him tight. Words wouldn't come. They didn't need to. The court date arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. Crawford wore his dress uniform for the first time in years. Noah wore a tiny suit that Rosa had helped pick out, his hair combed neatly, his shoes polished. Shadow wore a new collar with his Medal of Valor tag attached. The courtroom was crowded. Detective Warren sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Captain Morrison stood near the back, trying to look stern and failing completely. Agent Walsh had flown in from Washington, claiming she had business in New York, but fooling no one. And in the second row, Mia sat with her Aunt Rosa, bouncing with excitement. "Do you understand what's happening today, Noah?" the judge asked, peering down from the bench. Noah nodded. "I'm getting a dad, a real one, forever." The judge smiled. "That's exactly right. And do you want Officer Crawford to be your father?" "More than anything." "And Officer Crawford, do you understand the responsibilities you're assuming, the commitment you're making?" Crawford stood straight. "Yes, Your Honor. I've been a police officer for 20 years. I've protected this city. I've served this community. But nothing I've ever done matters as much as protecting this boy. He's my son. He always will be." The judge looked at them both for a long moment. Then she picked up her gavel. "It is the ruling of this court that the adoption of Noah Sullivan by James Crawford is hereby approved. From this day forward, Noah shall be known as Noah Crawford. Congratulations to you both." The gavel came down. Noah erupted from his seat and threw himself into Crawford's arms. "Dad, you're my dad." Crawford held him so tight he was afraid he might break something. Tears streamed down his face and he didn't care who saw. "I'm your dad," he whispered. "Forever and always." The courtroom burst into applause. Warren was openly sobbing. Morrison was blinking rapidly and looking at the ceiling. Walsh was pretending to check her phone while wiping her eyes. Shadow barked once, that same sharp, joyful bark, and pushed his way between them, demanding to be part of the celebration. Mia ran up and hugged Noah. "We're like a family now, a weird mixed-up family." Noah laughed through his tears. "The best kind of family." Rosa approached Crawford, her own eyes wet. "Thank you for everything, for finding Mia, for giving Noah a home, for being one of the good ones." Crawford shook his head. "I just followed a dog who refused to give up." Shadow's tail wagged at the mention. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Word had spread about the adoption, about the officer who had rescued a child from a suitcase and then made him his son. Camera flashes exploded as they walked down the steps. "Officer Crawford, can you tell us how it feels to officially become Noah's father?" Crawford looked down at Noah, who was clutching his hand with one fist and Shadow's leash with the other. "It feels like coming home," he said. "It feels like everything I've been searching for my whole life." "Noah, what do you want to say to other children who might be in difficult situations?" Noah thought for a moment. His face was serious, his voice clear. "Don't give up," he said. "Even when it's really dark. Even when you're scared. Even when you think nobody wants you. Because someone is looking for you. Someone is coming. You just have to hold on until they find you." Crawford's heart swelled with pride. This boy who had been stuffed in a suitcase and left to die, who had been told he was broken and unwanted, was standing tall and speaking hope to the world. "One more question," a reporter called out. "What about the other children, the 89, who were trafficked through the Harlan network?" Crawford's expression grew serious. "Thanks to the cooperation of Diane Harlan and the work of the FBI, 63 children have been located and reunited with family members or placed in safe homes. 24 cases are still being investigated. 2 children remain unaccounted for." He paused. "We're not stopping until we find them all." The recovery efforts had become Crawford's secondary mission. When he wasn't with Noah, he was coordinating with Walsh and her team, following leads, tracking down buyers across 12 countries. It was painstaking work, heartbreaking work, but every reunion made it worthwhile. Jennifer Okonkwo had been one of the success stories. Her son Marcus, now 7, had been found living with a family in Brazil who had genuinely believed they were adopting an orphan. When the truth came out, they cooperated fully with authorities. Marcus had come home 3 months ago. Crawford had been there for the reunion at JFK Airport. He'd watched Jennifer fall to her knees when she saw her son walking toward her, watched her gather him in her arms and weep for joy. Marcus didn't remember his mother. He'd been taken at 2 years old, but he'd felt something, some connection that transcended the years of separation. "Thank you," Jennifer had told Crawford afterward, still holding her son like she would never let go. "You gave me back my baby. You gave me back my life." Those moments kept Crawford going through the long nights and the difficult cases. Every child found was a victory. Every family reunited was proof that good could triumph over evil. But not every story had a happy ending. 2 children remained missing. Despite Diane Harlan's information, despite the international manhunt, despite everything, they simply couldn't be found. The buyers had covered their tracks too well. The children had disappeared into countries where cooperation was limited, where money bought silence and influence. Crawford thought about them every day. A 12-year-old girl named Sophia, a 9-year-old boy named Marcus Different tragedy. Their faces hung on his wall at work, a constant reminder that the job wasn't finished. "You can't save everyone," Warren told him one evening when she found him staring at those photos for the 100th time. "You saved dozens. You changed the system. But some battles can't be won." "I don't accept that." "I know you don't. It's what makes you a good cop." Warren put her hand on his shoulder. "And it's what will destroy you if you're not careful." Crawford knew she was right. He had a son now, responsibilities that went beyond the badge. He couldn't lose himself in the cases that couldn't be closed, but he couldn't stop looking either. The invitation arrived on a Saturday in June. It was printed on heavy cream paper, the kind used for formal events. Crawford opened it while Noah ate cereal at the kitchen table. "What's that?" Noah asked, mouth full of Cheerios. "An invitation to a ceremony in Washington, D.C. Washington, like where the president lives." "Exactly like that." Crawford read the invitation again, making sure he understood correctly. "It says Shadow is being honored at the White House, a special recognition for service to the nation." Noah's eyes went wide. "Shadow's going to meet the president." Shadow, hearing his name, lifted his head from his food bowl. "Looks like it, and we're invited to come with him." Noah jumped out of his chair and threw his arms around Shadow's neck. "You're famous. You're the most famous dog in the whole world." The ceremony was held in the Rose Garden on a perfect summer afternoon. Dignitaries filled the seats. Cameras broadcast to millions of viewers. And in the front row sat Crawford, Noah, Mia, Rosa, and a row of children who had been rescued because of Shadow's actions. The president stood at the podium, Shadow sitting calmly beside him. 6 months ago, a German shepherd named Shadow alerted his handler to an abandoned suitcase in Penn Station. Inside that suitcase was a 5-year-old boy who had been left to die. That single moment of instinct, that one bark set in motion an investigation that would uncover the largest child trafficking ring in American history. The president paused, looking at Shadow with genuine admiration. Because of Shadow's actions, 93 children have been recovered. 34 criminals have been arrested. International laws have been strengthened to protect vulnerable children around the world. And a little boy named Noah now has a father who loves him. Noah squeezed Crawford's hand. "Today I am honored to present Shadow with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor our nation can bestow. This medal recognizes not just one act of heroism, but a career dedicated to protecting the innocent and pursuing justice." The president knelt down and placed a medal around Shadow's neck. The crowd burst into applause. Shadow's tail wagged once. Noah whispered to Crawford, "He's not wearing a suit. Is that okay?" Crawford laughed through his tears. "I think he's perfectly dressed." After the ceremony, they were invited inside the White House for a private reception. Noah walked through the historic rooms with his mouth hanging open, Shadow padding beside him. "Is this real?" Noah kept asking. "Is this actually happening?" "It's real, buddy. All of it." They were photographed in the Oval Office. Noah sat in the president's chair while Shadow lay on the famous carpet, completely unimpressed by his surroundings. "He's not very excited," Noah observed. "He's not interested in fame," Crawford said. "He just wants to do his job and go home." "Like you." Crawford smiled. "Yeah, like me." On the flight home, Noah fell asleep with his head on Crawford's shoulder and his hand resting on Shadow's back. Crawford looked out the window at the clouds below and tried to process everything that had happened. A year ago, he'd been a widower, counting down the days until his partner was forced into retirement. He'd been going through the motions, surviving rather than living. And then, one bark had changed everything. His phone buzzed. A text from Walsh. "We found Sophia. She's alive. Reunion happening tomorrow. Thought you'd want to know." Crawford closed his eyes as relief washed over him. 64 children recovered, 1 still missing. The job wasn't done. Maybe it never would be. But every child they brought home was proof that the fight was worth fighting. The first anniversary of the rescue arrived faster than Crawford expected. He took Noah back to Penn Station to Platform 9, where it had all begun. Shadow walked between them, older now, his muzzle showing more gray, but his eyes as sharp as ever. "This is where you found me," Noah asked, looking around at the crowds rushing past. "Right over there." Crawford pointed to a pillar near the platform entrance. "That's where the suitcase was." Noah was quiet for a moment. "I don't remember much, just the dark, and not being able to breathe. And then Shadow's bark." "That bark saved your life." "I know." Noah knelt down and hugged Shadow tight. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for not giving up." Shadow licked his face gently. "Dad." Noah looked up at Crawford. What would have happened if Shadow hadn't noticed the suitcase? Crawford felt his chest tighten. He'd thought about that question many times over the past year. The doctors had said Noah had maybe 10 minutes left when Crawford found him. 10 minutes between life and death. I don't know, buddy, but it doesn't matter. Because Shadow did notice. And you're here, and that's all that matters now. Noah stood up and took Crawford's hand. I want to do something. For the other kids. The ones who are still waiting to be found. What do you want to do? I don't know yet. But something. I want them to know that people are looking for them. That they're not forgotten. Crawford looked at his son, this brave, resilient, incredible boy, who had survived the unthinkable and come out the other side with a heart full of compassion. Then we'll figure it out together. They walked back to the subway, just another family in the crowd. Nobody recognized them. Nobody knew that the little boy holding the police officer's hand had been found in a suitcase a year ago, declared dead 6 months before, that stolen from a system that was supposed to protect him. Nobody knew except the people who mattered. That evening, there was a gathering at Crawford's apartment. Warren brought pizza. Morrison brought beer and sparkling cider for the kids. Walsh flew in from Washington again, still pretending she had business in New York. Rosa arrived with Mia, who immediately ran to Noah and started planning their next adventure. To Shadow, Morrison said, raising his glass. The best damn dog this department has ever seen. To Shadow, everyone echoed. Shadow, lying on his bed in the corner, lifted his head briefly at the sound of his name, then went back to watching Noah with those wise, loving eyes. Later, after the guests had gone and the dishes were done, Crawford sat on the couch with Noah curled up beside him. Shadow lay at their feet, snoring softly. Dad? Noah's voice was sleepy. Yeah, buddy. I love you. Crawford's throat tightened. Noah had said those words before, but they still hit him like a wave every single time. I love you too, Noah, more than anything in this world. And Shadow too. And Shadow too. Noah yawned. He's getting old, isn't he? His face is getting gray. Crawford looked at his partner, his friend the dog who had changed both their lives with a single bark. Shadow was 9 now, ancient in German Shepherd years. His hips bothered him on cold mornings. He couldn't run as fast as he used to, but his heart was as strong as ever. He's got a lot of years left, Crawford said, hoping it was true. Good. Noah's eyes were closing. Because I need him. We both need him. We always will. Noah fell asleep, within minutes his breathing deep and peaceful. Crawford stayed there, not wanting to move, not wanting this moment to end. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. For a moment, Crawford's heart seized. The last text from an unknown number had been from Diane Harlan taunting him about the children she'd stolen. But this message was different. Officer Crawford, my name is Maria Santos. I'm the mother of the last missing child, Marcus. I know the authorities have been looking for him for a year. I know most people have given up hope, but I saw you on television today. I saw how you found all those other children. I saw your son who was lost and is now found. I need to believe there's still hope for my Marcus. Please, please don't stop looking. Crawford read the message 3 times. The last missing child. The one case that remained unsolved. The boy whose face still hung on Crawford's wall at work. He looked at Noah sleeping peacefully. He looked at Shadow, loyal and true. He thought about everything they'd been through, everything they'd overcome. Then he typed a reply. I haven't stopped looking. I never will. We will find your son. He put down the phone and closed his eyes. Tomorrow there would be work to do. Leads to follow. A child still waiting to be found. The fight wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But tonight in this apartment, surrounded by everything that mattered, Crawford allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. He had lost so much. His wife. His sense of purpose. His hope for the future. And then a German Shepherd had barked once in a crowded train station and everything had changed. Noah stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about dogs and presidents. Shadow's ear twitched. The apartment was warm and quiet and full of love. Crawford thought about all the children who were still out there waiting to be found, about all the families still searching, about all the Noahs and Mias and Marcuses who needed someone to refuse to give up on them. He made a silent promise to them all. I see you, I hear you, and I'm coming. Because that's what you do when you find someone who needs to be found. You bring them home. Shadow lifted his head and looked at Crawford as if he understood every word of that silent promise. Then the old dog let out a soft sigh and rested his chin on Crawford's foot. One bark had started this journey. One bark had saved a life. One bark had created a family where there had been none. And somewhere out there, another child was waiting for that same moment, the moment when someone would finally notice them, finally fight for them, finally refuse to walk away. Crawford would be there. He would always be there. Because some stories don't end when the credits roll. Some stories keep going, passing from one heart to another, one rescue to another, one family to another. This story started with a dog who refused to give up on a dying child. It continued with a man who refused to give up on justice. And it would never truly end because the love that saves us is the same love that drives us to save others. Noah Crawford slept peacefully, no longer afraid of the dark. Shadow kept watch, loyal to his last breath. And James Crawford sat in the quiet of his home, surrounded by everything he'd thought he'd lost and everything he'd found. A son, a purpose, a second chance. This is what family looks like when it's built from courage and compassion, and one single bark that changed everything. This is what hope looks like when it refuses to die. This is what love looks like when it finds you in the darkest moment and carries you into the light. And this is what happens when you believe, truly believe, that no one is broken, no one is unwanted, and no one is ever truly lost. Because somewhere someone is always looking, somewhere someone is always fighting, somewhere a dog is barking. And that bark means only one thing. Hold on, help is coming, you are found.